I would like to introduce you to what we were talking about. I mean, Marta already said, and this is something that actually I have a feeling that we're all talking about democracy. I mean, meaning all saying we and the guys that maybe we like less in the governments and also in the civil society space. And this, for that reason, I thought it's good to gather great people from different cultures, from different angles, that they have a different perspectives on the thing. So first of all, it's my great pleasure to introduce Adam Bodnar, the Polish Ombudsman, who was elected 2 years ago, also thanks to the great support of NGO coalition, led by some leading freedom of information, open data NGOs. Adam has worked in Helsinki Foundation for Human Rights for many, many years, so he is very much connected with the NGO sector. And what is also very important, especially in the during last days, he is the alumni of Central European University in Budapest. So let me welcome Adam Bodnar. Stephen King, Omidyar network. Stephen is working for he leads actually the global governance and citizen engagement unit within the Omidyar network. He has a very big portfolio of the institutions, NGOs, working in the field of a global change in different parts of the town. But first of all, I like to listen to Stephen. I had many occasions to do that. I mean, he had really good and I think very wide perspective of what is going on in the world, not necessarily in United Kingdom where he is based. Of course, I will touch the Brexit issue with him a bit, but I would be like, you will all be very much interested in hearing his perspective on the global issues as well. So welcome, Stephen King. Stephen. Next, Elena Calistru. Elena Calistru, she's, if you're on Twitter or Facebook, probably you are. You know, Elena has tweeted a lot about what has happened in the last weeks in Romania with big anti-corruption protests. But first of all, she is a civically fit leader of Funky Citizens, the NGO from Bucharest. The lady with the great energy, and I really like to work with her, and we have, maybe we'll share it later with you, we have some great ideas how to reform the European Union, because like we have to think big. So welcome Elena Calistru, who is thinking big. Elena? Okay, Sandor Lederer. So this is the leader, the founder and the director of K-Monitor, the anti-corruption and open data NGO in Budapest. And I love Sandor for that reason, that I'm asking him, hey, listen, like, so what happened like with the Constitutional Tribunal in Hungary? He said like this and this. Okay, so now I know what will happen, actually it already happened in Poland, unfortunately, in next 3 or 6 months. Like, so I can ask him like, okay, so what Orban did with media, so I know that like Kaczynski will do exactly the same in a couple of months. So this is, I'm telling you not to share the personal story, but to share that we are facing a kind of a domino. So this is not a new thing that we're meeting. So Sandor is fighting for anti-corruption, for open data, for transparency in Hungary, for many, many years, and still he's not frustrated, which is very important. Let me Sandor. Great. Last but not least, Hera Hudson. Oh, she is an energetic person on Twitter, and she's working in the very complicated field of open corporate. She works within this organization. She's dealing with quite complicated issues connected to transparency of the fiscal politics. But she is well known also for not forgetting about including different groups also into our community, because we also have to remember that we also, has the same disadvantages as most of societies, and Hera is the person that's like bringing us this perspective also from of the groups which are excluded from our open data, transparency, anti-corruption, technology, civic tech community, and I would like to see Hera on the stage now. So let's welcome Hera. Fantastic. Okay, so we have all. Welcome, guys and girls. And so I will first welcome you with a quote. I will later say from whom. All people aspire to be free. For too long, the people of the countries in the European Union, and perhaps American as well, have had a sense that political leaders are not defending their interests. There is a form of revolt on the part of the people against a system that is no longer serving them, but rather serving itself. Do you agree with the sentence? You're right? Like, it's also to the audience. You agree with that? No? You know, it's a tricky question, that's why. So I do agree. I do agree, but it is a quotation from one of the interviews of Marine Le Pen. And this is the problem that I'm seeing also in myself, that I do agree with a populist at some point. Like in the diagnosis when it comes to the democracy, the I would say liberal establishment, and actually the institutions that we were fighting for, especially here in the regions for many years. At the same time, we as the community, we're saying, okay, we have to listen to the people and we have to engage the people into the decision-making process. But then I think the results of the public poll made by YouGov, that in Romania, 82% of people agree with the ideas of the populist politicians. 78% in Poland, France 63%. But still, it means like if we want to follow the majority of those, maybe we should be more populistic at the point. And still, when I was Adam Bodnar is sitting on my left side, I remember the meeting you hosted on hate speech and the Facebook. That we have, that you brought up the diverse groups, like from the very right-wing groups who were fighting with what they were calling the censorship of Facebook, which was some kind of anti-hate speech policy. Actually, I was the one there, and my colleagues from human rights movements, that we're saying like, yeah, but like freedom of speech is limited, and like you have to take care of another person, blah, blah, blah. But I felt like, internally, I feel stupid, basically, that I was the one telling the people that, okay, you don't have to, really exercise your freedom so much. And these guys were saying, yeah, this is our freedom, you restricted our freedom. So, like, we are in kind of a position that I need actually your help a bit. Because, is it something wrong with me that, like, I do think maybe they have right, actually, in what they're saying, that we need more freedom, which is not restricted so much. And in these terms, I would like ask you the first and opening question, actually, which is a question connected with the name of the panel. Like, is democracy a buzzword? Like, what is democracy nowadays, Adam?
Thank you very much for inviting me here. Can you hear me? Yeah. So first I would like to spend just a minute to explain the context of this debate, because I think it was really very interesting debate that relates to this panel today, because in fact some nationalistic, more or less, groups started to claim that they are subject of censorship on internet and that this I would say censorship goes too far, that it is not only about hate speech, so something that could be qualified by Polish law as hate speech, but also by some actions that could be regarded as just matter of opinion that may go sometimes, and some issues that are not even regulated by Polish law. And I organized a debate, and as Krzysztof said, we had people just from the left and to the right side of NGO scene, I would say, including some specialists, cybertech, and specialists dealing with this matter. But my idea for this debate was to talk not only whether it is hate speech or not, or whether this or the other act of cutting some content on Facebook is possible or not, but whether we are talking about something more, that we have an instrument which we all use in our daily activities, and which is to a great extent controlling also our lives in terms of access to content, in terms of promotion of different events, in terms of promotion of our statements or closure of some of our statements. And that there is a big giant tech company that has a control over what is basically in this, to a great extent, marketplace of ideas. And my feeling was that currently, I cannot organize, I cannot imagine myself organization of any event or any conference without Facebook, without Twitter. It's like an instrument. But in a situation when it is an instrument, the question is to what extent it could be, or whether it is at all possible to control this instrument and to what extent it follows some democratic principles. And basically there was some thinking in the context of Google's Spain judgment of the Court of Justice of the European Union, when this right to be forgotten has been, I would say, established by the jurisdiction of the European law. So basically I tried to frame this debate in a context of not just responding to I would say contemporary events, but more general, what is the impact of such social media. I think the debate was quite interesting. But having said this, I would like to underline what I regard as the most important thing in this context of this debate. Because my feeling is that, at least in Poland, we tend to think that if we are going to protest, if we are going to take some statement in the public debate, it is easy to be on social media, it is easy to associate with different groups on social media. It is even quite easy, or relatively easy, to participate in the public assembly, which is organized even in a very massive fashion as a consequence of this. But what is missing, in my opinion, is next step. So to what extent our engagement at the electronic level produces our civic engagement in terms of being active actors in a society. And in my opinion, in order to be engaged, in order to make some panel discussion, to make some research, to check authorities when it comes to some, I would say, accountability processes, you need usually something more. You need not only, I don't mean even organization, but you need a trust of people with whom you cooperate. You need to spend sometimes, I would say, down to earth.
But I would say, like, populists, they are like kind of, you know, they know how to do it. Yeah. I mean, this is the risk for democracy then, or not? I mean,
but I would say that they didn't invent something new. What they do is basically they meet people and they try just to listen to people and to explain the reality in their terms, maybe giving very easy and simple answers to some big problems, but at least they do it. And you know, just look at one of the events which was happening in Poland a couple of months ago. We had a huge, immense protest of women, so-called Black Monday.
We'll talk about it today. We have a presentation on that.
But later on, I didn't see like number of debates, number of panel discussions organized in each of those cities where those protests were taking place. I didn't see emergence of the big social movement that would somehow take advantage of this energy which was created. Maybe it will appear, maybe it will be there in a moment, but my feeling is that when I travel quite a lot, and I meet ladies from and activists from this Black Monday, and it seems to me that they are there. They would like to do something, but it seems that something is missing here, like this link between this virtual world, which resulted in a big protest, and like the consequent, energetic, down-to-earth action, grassroots action on in different cities, especially locally, with some methods of deliberation, local deliberation, and better involvement of people. So that is the, I think, missing element in the Polish reality these days.
Okay, so I will take Elena and this protest and also social media and its terms. I mean, how you join in, but like also in the context of this democracy as you get it.
Yeah, I would like to put the things in context, meaning that, in my opinion, at least, what happened in the past 2 years, I would say, with the surge of populism. And other buzzwords like fake news, manipulation, illiberal democracies, and so on and so forth. It's the result of an economic crisis which didn't actually end. Why? Because we've encountered a situation in which none of us ever lived before. And we've had governments, we've had elites, and we've had plenty of smart people which tried to solve a problem, and what the citizens saw is that they couldn't. So, of course, distrust emerged. And, of course, people said, these guys, the elites, have nothing to do with us. They just know how to impose austerity measures, and look at us, the poor us, we have to support the consequences of their bad decisions. So I would say that populists actually address real needs and real fears of the citizens, and that's why it works. On the other hand, I haven't seen from the elites or from another part, an alternative part of the society, a comprehensive approach to address the same needs. Maybe we don't know so much about those needs. Maybe we need to be smarter and faster and provide more insight to what are those needs and those fears of the citizens, and in order for us to be able to address those needs. At this point, I feel like with all the data we have, with all the big data we have, with all the information that is available, we still don't know how to say, look, citizens in this country are afraid of foreigners because, I don't know, something. So, sorry, I would say that in order to get from the digital democracy approach to the offline democracy approach, we need to be smarter. And my expectation and my challenge to you is to think about ways in which we can be smarter than the populists, maybe to be rational populists, meaning that we can address those needs and fears in a rational and very smart way. As otherwise, we would still be somehow dependent on an agenda that the others make for us. So I wouldn't blame the people for choosing to be citizens only online and clicking or sharing or liking something. I would blame the civil society, I would blame the business sector, I would blame all those people that were at times too decent to fight the good fight with the same passion and with the same boldness that the populists are doing right now.
Yeah, Stephen, can I ask you, like, from this perspective also, as you're representing also, like, one of the, and this is like a sad thing for us in the terms here in the region, one of the very few funders actually that thinking about the region. And also you're from this perspective and from your global perspective, just working, you know, on what the people are actually doing in the world. I mean, this is like really just like you see that the civil space is shrinking, or is like some part of civil society or civil space is shrinking, and like we have, you know, new actors on the stage.
Sure, and again, thank you for inviting us here. We're really pleased to be associated with this event as Omidyar network. Yeah, I think civil society and civic space is under threat, and this is a global phenomenon. This is not a UK or a US or a Polish phenomenon. This is something which we're seeing in many countries around the world. I think governments are suspicious of foreign interference, as they call it, or foreign funding, and we are often accused of being the kind of agents of foreign intervention. You know, somehow that we're in league with the US government or the CIA or something in order to promote democracy or to promote open societies. And there are many other donors I know who are facing the same kind of accusations. So we've seen this rise of populism taking root not only in Europe, but also in the Philippines, in Thailand, in Nigeria, and Brazil, and so on. So we shouldn't kid ourselves that this is just a European or US phenomenon. This is happening worldwide. And I agree with Elena to some extent that this has its roots in the financial crisis of 2008 and some of the unsolved issues there. And I think some of the distrust that people are leveling at and accusations at the elites was that banks got away with it. They were bailed out. The financial sector was bailed out at the expense of ordinary people. So that was kind of one flashpoint. And as we've seen in history, you need those kind of flashpoints then to feed populism. And we saw this, of course, the devastating effect here in Europe in the 1930s. I think the difference between then and now is you have similar flashpoints, but I think you also have access to information in a way that people have never had before. And as Adam mentioned, you have social media, of course you have mainstream media as well. But in countries around the world, people are better connected. They have higher expectations of their government than they've ever had before, because they know exactly what's happening in real time in Hungary, in Pakistan, in Russia, and you know, in the UK and the US. So there is a sort of a greater expectation of how people should live as well. So if you were living in a rural village in Kenya 20 years ago, you wouldn't know how people lived in the US. Now everybody almost wants to have that kind of middle-class lifestyle. Everybody has those expectations and aspirations. And so as the world expands and as people get greater access to information, their expectations rise. And this then causes discomfort, dislocation, and frustration at the lack of progress that they're experiencing.
Thank you. And Hera, I mean, I remember a Twitter discussion that you initiated. I mean, it's Alex Howard from Sunlight Foundation wrote something about actually sharing my feeling a bit in the context of whether we should work or be happy or enthusiastic about the countries who are authoritarian or countries where the rule of law is being broken, as being enthusiastic about the transparency initiatives, open data thing, and it was a great discussion also about Hungary there and Poland. Like for example, I have this problem in Poland that I'm seeing how great actually initiatives, and in fact they are doing it. Our government is dealing with opening data and the whole transparency issues. I mean, in the terms of maybe, I would say, sometimes irrelevant data in the terms of democracy, but still like they're thinking in open data. But at the same time, I mean, we have attacks on the independence of judiciary system, constitutional tribunal, ombudsman. I mean, Adam is NGOs, so the same story. So, like, how we should also deal with that in the populistic era, or maybe it's a normal era. I mean, I don't know.
Thank you. I think one thing that populists are really good at, and as Elena said, is into tapping into people's fears, legitimate fears, but also fears that just come from us being brought up in a society which has austerity, which has suffering from the aftermath of neoliberalism. So this idea that give everyone the opportunity to interact in a free market and the market will provide. When that's not what happens. The millionaire's son or daughter has more access to resources and opportunities than the person from a small village. So the backlash comes from this very harmful neoliberalism that we all have been subjected to. So that's why I think that when we talk about transparency, sometimes it is not helpful, and this is, I feel free to disagree with me. I feel sometimes it's not helpful to think about the form of government and transparency in terms of open data. And the reason why I say this is because we need to institute transparency as a norm. So whether a government is corrupt or not, citizens need access to information. Whether it is about, the typical example that people from open data give is potholes. Whether it is how many potholes have been fixed, to the number of black men that are incarcerated in America as opposed to white men, for example. The amount of problems that people of color have getting jobs in France versus people who are not. That data, even if it's corrupted by the government, needs to be there so we as civil society and citizens can engage with it. So that is why what I feel is that even if we have authoritarian regimes and authoritarianism and democracy are sometimes one and the same thing, because as Krzysztof said in the start, what even is democracy? What communism is to Eastern Europe is what democracy is to the Middle East. So when I hear democracy, it's like alarm bells ringing in my head. So if you talk about participatory democracy, I think that we do need to work with authoritarian governments, not because of who they are, but because of who the citizens are. Because citizens deserve the chance to make their country better, and they cannot do it if they have nothing to fight against. If they have nothing in front of them that they can say, that's wrong, I know that's wrong. For example, in Afghanistan, one of the projects that Open Contracting is doing, who are here, one of their partners has been working with villages and looking at which schools got funding, which projects, infrastructure projects had funding, but are not there. Because there is this data, they are able to see the contract, see how much value is from it, and then hold them to account. That's why Panama Papers was so explosive, because ordinary citizens were looking on open corporates and seeing, why is my local radio host in Panama Papers? I already thought that this person, was much more than I thought they were. Or why is this minister connected with this business, which is getting all the contracts? Why are these people making all this money and is not disclosed in their tax returns? That is the power of transparency, and that's why I think while we should criticize the shrinking civil society space, authoritarianism, we can't stop the work that we're doing on transparency, because it's more important.
Yes, so Sandor, tell me, because we've been discussing it recently, that there are opinions that actually the transparency, in the eyes of some people, is to be blamed for the rise of populism, for the reason actually that Hera said, and Stephen, that the people are having the more information, and also our job as the open data, anti-corruption, civic tech organizations was to show the corruption also within this liberal democratic governments, and so there is a view that that transparency is the one to blame for the rise of populism. So do you share it?
Well, I think it has to do with that. I mean, of course, this is something really new for the last decades, that information is so easy to access and people get to know things that they have, never imagined how they work, how much money something costs, what politicians were doing. So this has, of course, an impact of what people have to deal with in every day when they consume news. It's a very different way of understanding the world, because you're much more on your own by interpreting what information you have out there, while previously you had to open the newspaper, and what was in there, that was the world outside your flat. So, of course, it's connection, but I wouldn't blame it. I think it's very necessary that with the technology, how it's advancing currently, and how digital rights are also moving forward, that people have access to much more information. That is very good. That is a very positive thing. So no way to say, okay, we should somehow, limit transparency because this is something that makes people mad. I think there is an asymmetry. We know a lot, but we don't really know how to deal with it and how to act and how to cooperate in this situation. And I think we're in kind of intermediate times where we are beyond a certain system, which you can call this neoliberalistic system what ran the world after Second World War, and also the rights, how they were built up and created. And we are heading towards something new, what we don't really know yet how it will look like, but we definitely know that it should be about people really participating in the decision that they're concerned about, that they have much bigger ownership about their environment and their own lives. So I think all the transparency is a huge opportunity for our societies, and I think this is also the motivation of most of the people who are here, is to understand and find out how we deal with this big opportunity.
And like, so I mean, you said the decision-making process engage the people, but like to engage the people, you also have to have institutions that would like to do that, and first of all, they would respond for this process. And actually, the first question on that topic, I would want to ask Elena about it, because my impression about what has happened in Romania, the huge crowd on the street, was that the Anti-Corruption Bureau, the DNA, had this, it was like seen as this institution that's really strong and independent, and the people get really like worried that it will be dissembled in some way.
Well, first of all, I would say that what happened in Romania is also the result of investing in the public education on the topic of corruption for so many years. A year and a few months ago, we've also had large protests after a fire broke in a club and 64 young people died. And a lot of investigative journalists wrote afterwards and showed how corruption actually killed a lot of people. They've exposed to corruption in the health sector. There was a protest and there was a resignation. The prime minister resigned. However, the movement was not so big. And we are often asked, why don't you go out and protest against what happens in the health sector? Because everybody is affected by it, but you go out and protest against corruption. It's not about the fact that people are so sophisticated and they do the entire argument of understanding that corruption actually affects your capacity to deliver health services to the citizens. It's not about that. It's about the fact that for so many years, Romania was the most corrupt country in the European Union. We've had a lot of pressure from the European institutions, but also from the Western allies like the NATO allies and especially the US. And we've had a strong civil society arguing for these things. However, until now, until 2 years ago, nobody felt that corruption is actually more than a buzzword and more than something that the elites and the National Anti-Corruption Directorate have to deal with it. With the collective case, and people saw that petty corruption affects them and that it can kill their friends, their families, the brother, the sister, and so on and so forth. And right now what we saw is that in the middle of the night, some politicians decide that if they want to pass a bill, even though a lot of people reacted against it, a bill that would partially decriminalize one of the corruption offenses, that they can do it. I think here it's also about the emotions of the citizens. It's about the fact that they've reacted to an arrogance and to the fact that they could easily see that some politicians decide in the middle of the night to pass something. And then they say, you know, and a politician actually said it, if it would have been during the summertime, it wouldn't have been a night. Because one of the things people were shouting on the streets was, you did it at night like thieves. And they didn't argue that it's not about being like thieves. They've argued about being during the night. I mean, that's crazy and arrogant, and it shows what is the level of let's say manipulation, because in this very, very small example, we can see how a government is trying to actually spin off a story and make it about whether it would be a night or not. I would say that this happened at a very interesting moment when I think we've had complicated moments in 2012, 2013, and discussions about corruption allegations and so on and so forth. One of the explanations, for me at least, for this happening right now is that for the very first time we saw that there will be no Prince Charming saving Romania at the end of the day. There will be no European Commission which will go out strongly and say, look, Romania, this is not good. Why? Because Hungary happened before, Poland happened before, the European Union reacted, but so all of a sudden we weren't the naughtiest kid in the classroom. We were one of the few, and it looked like you can do that. You can actually nothing will actually happen to you. In the U.S., usually the U.S. embassy would react in Romania and say, look, we need rule of law and a powerful democracy because you're a NATO member state and so on and so forth. The United States, with Trump being just elected president, come on, who would have believed them? Or it wouldn't have the same, let's say, weight as it used to be. So the Romanian citizens found themselves in the situation in which there wouldn't be any happy ending if they wouldn't react. So that's what they did.
Okay, so I have a line of speakers. It's Stephen, Adam, and then Sandor wanted to say something.
I mean, I think Elena makes a very good point, and I think just as sort of that last point about the diminution of the US's role as moral policeman, I think is really important. And I think what we're seeing and what we will see, I expect, is the US withdrawing from that role in many, many different regions. In this region, certainly, but also in the Middle East, in Sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, and so on. I think we will then see the legitimization of bad behavior. And then, because there's no one to provide that check and balance, there's no conditions that are then being imposed on whether it's international aid, whether it's trade relations or whatever, then you have almost a sort of permission to act badly. And because there's no recourse. And in a very minor way, we're starting to see this in the UK with post-Brexit, the kind of legitimization of hate crimes. So we saw a tragic event happen in the outskirts of London last Friday, where there was a young Kurdish refugee who was 17 who was brutally beaten up by a mob of 30 people. Now that kind of stuff becomes more and more normal, and that's the thing that we've got to fight against. Is that, you know, you're seeing this online, you're seeing this offline as well, is that the legitimization of that kind of violence and that kind of hatred is something you've really got to stop. And that is both happening at a national level with that kind of behavior, but then also at an international level as the kind of traditional moral policemen start to withdraw into their own bunkers.
You can see it in Syria right now. No, sorry.
I wanted to refer to two issues. First, there was this question about what is populism and how to react. And I think that sometimes it is important to read some political scientists, what they write about it. And there is a very good book which will be soon published also in Polish by Jan Werner Miller, under the title, What is Populism? And I don't want to give definitions, because I think we all are aware of different strategies that are used by populists. But he's offering some good, I think, idea how to tackle with this. So he says that one of the major problems of different, let's say, liberal parties or liberal movements or intellectuals is to create something like the sanitary cordon over populists, to say, oh, you are populist, it means you are wrong. And basically, and by this approach of not acceptance, not giving a deeper thought to what is said. So he's claiming that we should always think about what are the underlying causes for some populist thinking, what are the reasons that some statements are made and they need and they are met with some acceptance by the population, and at that time to respond to those underlying needs by presenting some alternative visions, strategies, or projects. So, for example, if you listen to Polish politicians talking about judiciary these days, you will hear that they are corrupted, that they are post-communist, that they did all the different bad things. And on the other hand, if you look into the Greco reports on, let's say, level of corruption, you will see that it is the lowest. You know, I don't know even one single case of judge that would
like
be
6 in the last 10 years, I think.
Yes, so 6 for 10 years is, and you know, and maybe I might have some doubts concerning sometimes opportunistic thinking of judges, but not really about corruption. So the question is how to transform this narrative into something that, you know, there are some mistakes, there are some maybe individual people, but you should consider this and this and this, and how to address this to the massive audience. And I think this element is missing. But the problem is that this digital world is not only used by civic activists, by NGOs, by intellectuals and so on, but it is perfectly used by the government. So the government, which has control over media, over public media, at least in Poland, which has created a huge advertisement market for sponsored by the state-owned companies, for some media, private media outlets, and basically has impact on the public debate with this, is also using all different techniques of, I would say, civic, of different techniques of activism in the internet. Twitter, Facebook, and all other possibilities. But I would say more, that the problem is that the information flow in internet is to a great extent subject of the governmental control, and sometimes we don't even know it, because if there are different measures introduced, and for example, there were some laws passed in Poland last year about the new surveillance law, new anti-terrorist legislation, we are maybe not even aware to what extent the government has in fact control over what is going on in internet, about attitudes, about strategies of political parties. And in a situation of the paralysis of the rule of law mechanisms, like in Poland, that the Constitutional Court is not any longer effective, you cannot even control it. So I think it gives, I would say, like the additional competitive advantage at the political scene, and we should know about it. I mentioned judiciary. One of the recent ideas is to create an access to all the databases which have judges, or to all the case files which are in an electronic format. So the general idea is we need this because we need to take care about efficiency of justice.
We, it means government.
The government. Because we are responsible for the efficiency, we need to have access. But I know that it will not be used for efficiency, but it will be used just for picking and choosing cases of one or the other judge in order to check, you know, whether he was in fact very much efficient in a, I would say, in a way that the government would like, and if not, some details would be later on found on pages of some newspapers. So also what is quite striking that we observe manipulation with words. So you mentioned this example with you are thieves at night, okay? So the problem was that it was not at night, yes? So for example, when we are talking these days about reform of the National Council of Judiciary, and the idea of the reform is to make political subordination to the National Council of Judiciary, it is named as the democratization of the National Council of Judiciary. If we are talking about creating political control over the Constitutional Code, it was about repairing the efficiency of the Constitutional Code. So, and please note that I'm not only saying about one or the other word, but this word is later on repeated 100 times. So even if you are the smartest NGO, even if you are Krzysztof Izdebski and his friends and doing all different tricks using new technologies, you are not able to get through the message which is created by national media, by governmental propaganda in this sense.
Yeah, this is I agree. I mean, this is what I think one of the problems, and actually all of you referring to the communication, is that we are like very fast to be losing this war. It's like the fake news now is my impression, like in States, it's used by Donald Trump saying that the fake news is everything that he doesn't agree with. And this is, so maybe we lost this war. If Sandor, you wanna say something, that I had a question to Hera.
Yeah, I wanted to add something to the institutions and their credibility, and you know that people in the region often got used to it. Well, because the EU is saying, because the United States saying something that's how it should be. And these institutions had a great authority. These institutions often lost credibility at the same time. So look at the US talking about human rights, and look at what they've done in Iraq or Afghanistan to people. So what's that? Look at Germany talking about business ethics, ventures, while German companies bribing throughout the world to get contracts. So I think there is a lot of challenges toward the credibility of the institution. Or look at the European Union telling Romania to keep on fighting against corruption and not releasing the anti-corruption report. So I think this is a so this is a huge challenge, and I think what was really nice to see in Romania, that people felt when they went on the street that they can lose something that they endorsed, that was important for them, this fight against corruption, and that things have consequences. I think this is in our region something very new, that things have consequences. Politicians are brought to prison for doing something, and I think these experiences of participation, of endorsement, of feeling part of the story are the ones that have to be created now, so people feel, okay, we have to protect our institutions or establish our own institutions instead of those that are not credible anymore.
Our own, like, you mean citizens' institutions? Like,
I mean,
let's hack democracy?
No, I mean much more in a broader sense, that you see that this institution has a sense, this institution has to be established, this institution is responsive, so in a way that you are connected in a way and understand why they're, because these institutions that we currently have, although a lot of them are very good, they were actually brought to us after our transitions. As the whole democratic system fell into our arms, it was a good system, and it's good that happened, but now we see that we didn't manage to connect to the system.
Yeah, it's not like democracy is not given for once, and Hera, I introduced you at the beginning also, like the one who is thinking about this, the group, excluded group, and also the other opinion I met in the context of rise of populism, and actually it was articulated in the panel as well. But this is something what interests me, is that maybe we were too much focused on minority groups, and we forgot about majority. I mean, maybe we should also like change this, or we should at some point involve this in the discussion?
That's the first time someone's asked me that question. I will answer that, but before that, I really want to thank you for bringing that point about the US, because I can't sit here on the stage and not say something about it. The US role in Latin America and Middle East has been so toxic in supplanting democracy and creating corrupt institutions which appear democratic but are extremely corrupt, that people have lost trust in the word democracy. And if our institutions and if our economies, just like we need to tear down the economic models that we are basing our economies on, which is just a house of cards, which is assumption, which has led us to this world of austerity, we need to do the same thing with democracy. Democracy cannot be what the US wants. Democracy has to be about the citizens, about their interests, not where it aligns with the US interests. So the fact that the US has always had a hypocritical and double standard role is why people raise questions when US-funded projects operate. And those questions are incorrect when, of course, they're doing great work. But the reason why that is legitimate, that concern that people have, and we cannot turn a blind eye to it. And then the question about whether we have been focusing on minorities too much. I mean, I love it. I love that you asked me this question because I have never been asked this question. I do not agree with you because, and I think you knew that. The reason is that when you started this conversation off, talking about freedom of expression, and we heard about there needs to be space for debate. And I think in politics, we often hear this term about, there's too much political correctness. I don't think there is enough political correctness because if there was, we wouldn't be hearing the kind of offensive things we hear about women, about minorities, about immigrants, about refugees. The way Polish people are treated in the UK, it is shameful. There have been attacks. And I never thought in my life I would see white people hurting other white people in the UK. And that is exactly what's happening to Polish people who work hard, who pay their taxes, who rebuild communities in the UK. And no, we have not been thinking too much about minorities because what happens is a top-down approach still. In governments, in the UK government, which for years, as someone tweeted earlier, has been a model for democracy. And I think in many ways it's true, in many ways it's not. But they come up with these policies which are not representative. They don't consult local community groups. They'll choose their favorite experts who are academics, and then they just consult them, and then supposedly a policy is representative. It's not. If that was true, we would, the general public in the UK would know how much money Polish immigrants bring to the UK, Romanians, Hungarians. The amount of attacks you see in the UK is emblematic of the fact that we have a system where the majority always rules, and whatever is convenient. Brexit was used as a political, as someone in the EU said, as a cat fight between the Conservative Party. But it hasn't caused the country to be racist. It's not. That was already there. Those emotions were already there. It has just legitimized it. As you said, the fact that these things are now becoming okay, to call someone a Pole and then throw something in their face. My Polish friends tell me that they're scared sometimes of speaking in public when they think they're because of their accent. So this is not okay, but this is the life that brown people, black people have been living in Europe for years. So, and now, finally, Eastern Europeans are also figuring out that this is the situation they are in the UK and France and Germany, and it's not okay.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is something that I said before, talking about the region that and then Darko Barkan from Zaszczony, he was saying hey guys, we know about populism for the last 20 years, so this is now you Western world understand us. Hey guys, we have 5, maybe 6 minutes, so I would like to finish with some futuristic deliberating on that, because there is this whole discussion about artificial intelligence or deep learning. So a bit switching the subject, but not so much. And so, as I understand, I'm also not really technologist, and I'm not know how it would work. But from what I understood is those creators might have a conscience at some point. So if you are a conscious creator, you're kind of a human being. So do you think that those human beings, those creators, I would say, which is actually bias, I shouldn't say that, maybe it's a hate speech, but will they save us at some point? I mean, will they have human rights? I mean, how, because I haven't heard a debate on human rights for artificial intelligence, and it seems that actually, I mean, we will witness, maybe not in our lives, but the lives of our children. I don't know, Stephen, you want to refer to that?
Yeah, and I'm not going to try and predict whether robots will take over the world or not. But I think, certainly what we've been concerned at Omidyar Network, and for those of you who don't know about Omidyar Network, we're a philanthropic investment firm, which is both a foundation and a for-profit investor set up by Pierre Omidyar, who's the founder of eBay. So we've been very concerned about the lack of regulation and sort of the parameters around the growth of artificial intelligence. So, for example, we've seen artificial intelligence making decisions for, whether it's kind of access to financial services or mortgages or your, rights to certain services increasingly becoming a norm. And that's starting in the US. It's also happening a lot more in Europe. But there isn't really any kind of regulation around the extent of that. And also the no recourse. So, for example, if you were refused for a loan or a mortgage or whatever, and that could be based on artificial intelligence algorithms, you really don't have any recourse. There's no ombudsman. You know, there's no regulation around this. And when you talk to the companies who are using artificial intelligence, they'll say, well, that's all kind of to do with the algorithms. That's the tech guys. And the tech guys will say, well, we haven't really thought about any of the consequences of this. That's really up to the companies or the government and so on. So you have this vacuum at the moment in decision making. So one of the things that we've done is that we've actually, with Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn and with MIT in Harvard and the Berkman Klein Center, has set up a research fund where we put $27 million into this to actually look at some of what are going to be the future consequences of artificial intelligence before it's too late.
Thank you.
It's a very tricky question, and I would like to answer also in a tricky way. As I said before, I travel quite often around Poland, so I spend more or less 1 week per month outside Warsaw to go to different regions to meet regular people, NGOs and so on. And basically those meetings are like this, that there are people with some different interest issues concerning human rights or social life, they ask me, and I try to answer. But I think one of the answers I give is that I don't know the answer to the question. And to be honest, I don't know the answer. I didn't deeply thought about it. And I think that's also a matter of principle, and which is sometimes missing in our public debates, that people who are performing different public functions are saying, I don't know. I have to thought about it. I have to think about it. I will come back with answer to you in a week, in 2 weeks. I will maybe organize something on this in order to have a deeper discussion. So my answer to you is that I don't know, because I'm so much down to earth with current issues and with current fight, to be honest, with standards of the rule of law, that I don't answer
but you have to think about
very much intellectual, but I will think about it.
Yeah, because you will have much more clients, maybe, like at the Ombudsman office.
My term ends in 3.5 years, and I'm not going to prolong it.
Okay, Hera?
Okay, so I've actually spent a lot of time reading and thinking about this. If this is one thing I can recommend, please read the book, Weapons of Math Destruction. It is the most terrifying and eye-opening book on the subject. And just like Stephen said, it's a black box, like algorithms which judge whether we apply for jobs, how we are jailed, and they're as biased as the people who make them. And just like, I keep talking about neoliberalism, and you guys are remember this phrase by the end of the conference, but just like neoliberalism is based on assumptions, so are these algorithms. Because they're just using, the problem with stats is that they look good because they're numbers, but they have enormous room for error, for bias, for discrimination, and there's no recourse to justice. You cannot just say like, excuse me, can you please tell me on what basis did this algorithm think that I was not appropriate for this job? Do you ever wonder when you apply to all those online positions when you never hear back? You know, there's a very good chance there's an algorithm behind it. So I think that the EU actually needs to have, I think, a dedicated unit on understanding how algorithmic bias is affecting EU citizens and how we can create a space where we can ask for transparency on this, because these algorithms need to be public, or there has to be some sort of way that you can do an FOI request and get that algorithm back if the company itself knows how it's done.
Yeah, actually, that's what I wanted to say. So I think, connecting back to the transparency question that you were asking at the beginning, I think I don't know the answer on your question, but regarding transparency, actually we're lagging behind. Because if it comes to what companies are doing, I have no idea what Facebook is doing with my data, although it's my data. I mean, that's the place where we have to move forward with transparency. This is again another big topic. So I think. The final answer is privacy. We have privacy. Algorithms shouldn't have privacy, but transparency should affect algorithms too, and artificial intelligence. So that's, I think, also another direction we have to head towards.
Thank you, Elena.
Well, I think that this leads us to two things I find very important for us as activists, as people working in the area of civic tech. First, to make the agenda and to think in advance about several topics that will affect not only our democracies, but also our lives, because as far as I'm concerned, I think that artificial intelligence will mostly affect the same category, which is now very vulnerable to populism, those that will lose their jobs due to artificial intelligence, and that will make a lot more people which had good paying, decent jobs vulnerable. So we have to think about those citizens that will probably be also left behind, or at least a part of them. And then the second lesson is about going back to the basics. Unfortunately, maybe we are too sophisticated. Maybe our parents or our grandparents don't know what a CSV file is, and maybe we are our assumption is that they should know what a CSV file is, and I think that's not okay. And we need to go back to the basics of democracy, put the relevant questions. Does this person need rights? What kind of rights? Is it about being a human being, or is it about having a conscience? What are the ethical links to, or what does a good citizen mean, and how do we get there? How much power should it have, or should I have? And these basic questions, I think, should be at the very beginning of any projects we do, and before getting too excited about an interesting database which is in an open format, and maybe we can find links and discover I don't know what corruption, a big corruption case or offshore accounts of a politician. Maybe we should have this question in mind. What does it mean, and how do I explain this to the average citizen, and how do I make this? Why is this relevant for the democracy in my country, and what relevance does it have for the citizen as a player in this game?
Thank you, Elena. It was great, actually, summarizing of the panel, and unfortunately we have to finish it. So I want to thank you very much for joining us.